Peter in Poland writes, Paul, my name is Piotr, or Peter, and I am writing to you from Poland in Warsaw. Okay. I've been dealing with the topic of DSD audio for over 2 years. For me personally, PCM could cease to exist. Okay. The difference is so huge that I avoid listening to PCM altogether. Why is DSD so unknown and meaningless these days? At least in Europe. Here the inventors of the format, namely Sony and Philips, are not without fault. I understand copy protection very well. What I don't understand is having to listen to my purchased SACD discs converted to PCM for years without knowing that DSD exists. I'll tell you in all honesty, I'm grateful to the hackers who managed to copy the SACD with Sony PS3 at that bravo. It is now possible to play an SACD in such a way that you can hear DSD directly. So what happened to copy protection? And why is DSD so unknown? Well, you know, and I'm sure this is one of the reasons you wrote to me, that we are big fans of DSD. Octave Records is all based on DSD. We record everything in DSD. And yeah, I get it. It's so much better. But it is a tough format. When Sony came out with the SACD, our own Gus Skinnis, who was on the forefront of the SACD and working at Sony, working for Sony, and building a recording system that could handle DSD called Sonoma, and it was in Sonoma, California, strangely enough. Maybe a connection there. But yeah, they worked on that, and it's a great system. It works at 1x DSD, which is 64, 2.8 megahertz. DSD, as we know, is a 1-bit system, and it sounds amazing. Almost all of Octave Records' first releases were all done on the Sonoma system. But Sony gave up on it, and as Sony tends to do, they go in big, they see if it works, and if it doesn't, they're out. I mean, Betamax, VHS, great example. I mean, it's a tired example, but Sony and Philips went in to do the SACD, to provide a step up from the CD. And man, it was a huge step up from the CD. Still is. We still release everything at Octave well, we do a lot of downloads, but everything is on SACD so that you can play the DSD files. And it is so much superior, but it's a very difficult format to work with. Very few people clung onto it. It's just a lot easier, especially now that we're in the recording business, to do everything in PCM. You have Pro Tools, you have great DAWs, digital audio workstations, that are easy to edit in, to do whatever you want, and the results can sound great. I've got tracks upstairs that were recorded in Pro Tools by people who really cared about the way music sounds, and they sound terrific. I use them as demos all the time. Are they as good as DSD? No, not even close. But they are good. And much of it depends on the recording engineer, the mix engineer, and how good their ears are, what their goal was. Not everybody's goals are what we audiophiles want. Guaranteed for that, right? So I don't have a good answer of why. I just know that when the SACD came out, it was kind of a flop. Because what Sony and Philips had hoped to do was to pull a rerun of what they did from vinyl to CD. I mean, think about it. The whole world was playing vinyl records. That was all anybody had. And all of us had, hundreds and hundreds of vinyl records. But you can't make a lot of money on selling more vinyl records unless you have new music. But what you could do is come up with an entirely new format, one that didn't have the ticks and the pops and didn't wear out and wasn't such finicky cleaning the needle and all that. What if you could present an optical disc that could be copied in perfection forever, that had no ticks or pops, that had huge dynamic range, that had no noise, and you pop it in and bingo. Now, that was the promise of CDs, and Sony and Philips got together and said, you know, if we can pull this off and convince everybody that it's better, because it is mostly, we could resell everything that has ever been published on vinyl. So what do? They went out, Sony did at least, went out and bought a whole bunch of record companies, knowing that when the transition came and everybody dumped their vinyl and bought new CDs, they're going to rebuy all that music. And they made a bloody fortune off of it, and they did really well. The SACD, at least as far as my knowledge, was another attempt at making a yet better format so they could resell it again, and everybody said, CDs are good enough. Yawn. End of story. At least I have no evidence of that whatsoever, but that's the story that I hear. Anyway, it was a better format, and it remains a better format, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to buy into it. So if you are interested, go to Octave Records. We are complete DSD freaks. We'll sell you some really good sounding music. And we appreciate you supporting the label too. All right. Thanks for the question. Talk to you all later. Bye.